I didn't mean to be harsh. I was just being honest. Attraction matters in relationships, and if my boyfriend was going to give up on himself, what was I supposed to do? Let it slide and pretend I was still into him? I told him the truth. If he kept gaining weight, I'd eventually walk. I thought I was helping him. He could have taken it as motivation. Instead, he lost the weight, and then lost me like I was the problem all along. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. Now, let's get back to the story. I've always been a straight shooter. I don't believe in sugarcoating things or pretending problems don't exist just to spare someone's feelings. If you ask me, most relationships fail because people aren't honest enough about what they need and want. They let little issues build up until they become big problems instead of addressing them head-on. Mark and I met at a friend's birthday party 3 years ago. He was cute in a nerdy way, with dark hair and glasses and this shy smile that I found charming. He wasn't the most muscular guy in the room, but he was lean and fit, the kind of person who clearly took care of himself. He was working as a software developer and seemed to have his life together. He had his own apartment, a decent car, and ambitions beyond just getting by. He was also incredibly sweet to me from the very beginning, always opening doors and remembering little details about things I'd mentioned in passing. For the first 2 years of our relationship, everything was great. Mark was attentive and romantic, and I felt lucky to have found someone so devoted. He would plan thoughtful dates, surprise me with flowers, and listen to me talk about my work problems without trying to immediately fix everything. The problem started about a year ago, when Mark got a promotion at his job that came with significantly more stress and longer hours. He was working 10 to 12-hour days, dealing with difficult clients, and basically living at the office during busy periods. That's when I first noticed him starting to let himself go. It began with small things. He'd come home exhausted and order takeout instead of cooking the healthy meals we used to make together. He'd skip his morning runs because he was too tired or because he had to leave for work early. He'd drink beer while watching TV at night instead of going to the gym like he used to. At first, I was understanding. Everyone goes through stressful periods, and I knew his job was demanding. I figured once things settled down at work, he'd get back to his normal routine, and everything would return to how it was before. But weeks turned into months, and Mark's habits only got worse. The takeout became a nightly occurrence. The gym membership went unused. The morning runs were completely abandoned, and slowly but surely, Mark started gaining weight. It wasn't dramatic at first, maybe 10 pounds that I could rationalize as temporary stress weight. But then it was 20 pounds, then 30, then more. His clothes started fitting differently, his face got rounder. His energy levels dropped even further, creating a cycle where he was too tired to exercise, which made him more tired, which made him less likely to exercise. I watched the man I'd fallen for disappear under layers of weight and laziness, and I didn't know what to do about it. I tried being subtle at first. I'd suggest we go for walks together or offer to cook healthy meals. I'd mention new restaurants that had lighter menu options or ask if he wanted to try a yoga class with me, but Mark would always find excuses. He was too tired, too busy, too stressed to focus on anything besides work and collapsing in front of the TV. That's when I started talking to my friends about it. I had a group chat with my 3 closest girlfriends, Ashley, Morgan, and Kelsey, and we talked about everything in our lives, including relationship issues. They'd always been supportive when I needed advice, so I started venting to them about Mark's weight gain. At first, they were sympathetic. They understood that attraction was important in relationships, and that it was frustrating to watch your partner stop taking care of themselves. Ashley had been through something similar with her ex-boyfriend, who'd gained weight after college and never lost it. But when I mentioned that I was considering giving Mark an ultimatum about his weight, Morgan warned me that it might backfire. "Girl, be careful about how you approach this," she texted. Guys can be sensitive about weight stuff, and if you come at him wrong, he might just leave instead of changing. I brushed off her concern because I knew Mark better than she did. Mark wasn't the type to walk away from a relationship over honest feedback. He was gentle and accommodating, the kind of person who would rather work on himself than lose someone he loved. Besides, I wasn't planning to be mean about it. I was just going to be honest about my needs and expectations. I was going to give him the opportunity to fix the problem before it destroyed our relationship. The conversation happened on a Tuesday night in February. We'd ordered Chinese food again, and I watched Mark eat way more than he needed while complaining about feeling bloated and uncomfortable. I'd been building up to this conversation for weeks, and I finally decided it was time to be direct. "Mark," I said, waiting until he'd finished eating, "we need to talk about something, and I need you to really hear me." He looked up from his phone with this expression of mild concern, like he was expecting me to complain about his work schedule or ask him to help more with housework. "I'm worried about you," I continued. "You've gained a lot of weight since you got the promotion, and I can see that it's affecting your health and your energy. But I also need to be honest about how it's affecting me." Mark set down his phone and gave me his full attention, which I appreciated. At least he was taking this seriously. "I love you," I said, "but attraction is a big part of any relationship. And right now, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling to feel as physically attracted to you as I used to be." I could see hurt flash across Mark's face, but he didn't interrupt or get defensive. He just nodded for me to continue. "I don't want this to become a bigger problem," I said. "I don't want to wake up in 6 months feeling like I'm not attracted to my own boyfriend. So I need you to know that if you keep letting yourself go like this, if you keep gaining weight and giving up on your health, I'm eventually going to have to walk away." The words hung in the air between us for what felt like forever. Mark just stared at me with this unreadable expression, and I started to worry that I'd been too harsh. "I'm not trying to be mean," I added quickly. "I'm trying to be honest about what I need to stay happy in this relationship. I think you can do this. I think you can get back to where you were. I just need to know that you're willing to try." Mark was quiet for a long time, and I could see him processing what I'd said. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said simply. "Okay," I repeated, surprised by how calm he seemed. "Okay, I'll work on it," he said. "You're right that I've been letting my health slide. I'll do better." I felt a rush of relief that he was being so reasonable about it. I'd been worried he might get angry or defensive, but instead he was taking responsibility and agreeing to make changes. I leaned over and kissed him, telling him how much I loved him and how proud I was that he was willing to work on this. That night, I felt like we'd had a breakthrough. I'd been honest about my needs, he'd listened without getting upset, and now we could move forward together toward a solution. I texted my friends about how well the conversation had gone, how mature Mark had been about everything. The next morning, Mark's alarm went off at 5 a.m. I heard him get up quietly and leave the apartment, and when I got up for work 2 hours later, I could see that he'd been for a run. His running shoes were by the door, still damp with morning dew. I was proud of him for taking action so quickly. It showed that he was serious about making changes, that my honesty had motivated him instead of discouraging him. What I didn't realize was that I'd just set in motion the destruction of my own relationship. Over the next few weeks, Mark's transformation was remarkable. He started waking up at 5 every morning to go running, rain or shine. He stopped ordering takeout and started meal prepping on Sundays, filling our refrigerator with carefully portioned containers of grilled chicken and vegetables. He joined a gym near his office and started going during his lunch breaks. He bought a fitness tracker and became obsessed with hitting his step goals and calorie targets. He downloaded apps to track his workouts and his weight loss progress. At first, I was thrilled. This was exactly what I'd wanted. A boyfriend who took care of himself and prioritized his health. I bragged to my friends about how quickly he'd turned things around, how effective my honesty had been in motivating him. But as the weeks turned into months, I started to feel like I'd created a monster. Mark became completely obsessed with his fitness routine. He would choose restaurants based on their healthy options instead of what we actually wanted to eat. He'd bring protein bars to social events instead of enjoying the food everyone else was having. He started declining invitations to happy hours and dinner parties because they interfered with his workout schedule. The weight was falling off him rapidly. In 3 months, he'd lost 30 pounds and was looking more like the guy I'd originally fallen for. But instead of being satisfied with his progress, he seemed determined to keep going, to become even fitter and more disciplined than he'd been when we first met. He also started changing in other ways that I hadn't expected. He became more confident, more assertive about his needs and preferences. He started speaking up when he disagreed with me instead of just going along with whatever I wanted. He became less accommodating, less eager to please. I told myself these changes were positive, that he was just becoming more self-assured as he felt better about his body. But honestly, I missed the version of Mark who was more focused on me and our relationship than on his bicep measurements. The real problem started when Mark hired a personal trainer. Her name was Cara, and she was everything I wasn't. She was tall and athletic, with the kind of naturally toned body that comes from years of dedicated fitness. She had long blonde hair that she wore in a high ponytail, and she always seemed to be glowing with health and vitality. Mark started training with Cara 3 times a week, and suddenly she was a constant presence in our lives. He would come home talking about the new exercises she'd taught him, the nutrition advice she'd given him, the goals they were working toward together. At first, I tried to be supportive. I asked about his workouts and complimented his progress. But as Mark continued to lose weight and gain muscle, I started to feel threatened by how much time he was spending with this beautiful, fit woman who shared his newfound passion for health and fitness. I started making little comments about how obsessed he seemed with working out, how he was spending more time at the gym than at home with me. I'd joke about him becoming a gym bro or acting like a fitness influencer with all his workout selfies and meal prep photos. Mark would just shrug off my comments and continue with his routine. He seemed completely unbothered by my attempts to make him feel self-conscious about his dedication to fitness. "You said you wanted me to get in shape," he'd say when I complained about his schedule. "This is what it takes." By month 6, Mark had lost 60 pounds and looked completely different. His clothes hung off him, so he had to buy a whole new wardrobe. He started wearing fitted shirts that showed off his new muscle definition, and he carried himself with a confidence I'd never seen before. Other people started noticing too. Women would smile at him when we were out together, and he'd smile back instead of looking down at his shoes like he used to. Servers at restaurants would flirt with him, and he'd engage in friendly conversation instead of hiding behind me. I should have been happy about his transformation, but instead I felt increasingly insecure and out of control. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in August. I woke up to find Mark packing a suitcase, moving quietly around our bedroom like he was trying not to wake me. "Where are you going?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "I'm moving out," he said, without looking at me. I thought I'd misheard him. "What do you mean, moving out? Moving out where?" "I found an apartment closer to my gym," he said, folding a stack of his new fitted t-shirts. "I think we both know this isn't working anymore." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the one making ultimatums, the one with the power to stay or leave. Mark was supposed to be grateful that I'd motivated him to improve himself. "Are you breaking up with me?" I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Mark finally looked at me, and I could see something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or hurt. It was something worse. It was indifference. "Brittany," he said quietly, "you never loved me. You loved the idea of controlling me. You loved having someone who would change himself to make you happy." I started to protest, to tell him that wasn't true, that I'd only wanted him to be healthy and take care of himself. But he held up his hand to stop me. "You gave me an ultimatum about my weight because you thought I'd never have the strength to leave you," he continued. "You thought I'd always need your approval, that I'd always be so grateful for your attention that I'd put up with whatever conditions you wanted to set." "That's not true," I said, but even as I said it, I could hear how weak it sounded. "You've spent the last 6 months trying to sabotage my progress," Mark said, continuing to pack, "making me feel bad for working out, for eating healthy, for feeling good about myself. You didn't want me to get in shape. You wanted me to stay insecure and dependent on you." I wanted to argue with him, to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't find the words. Because somewhere deep down, I knew he was right. Mark finished packing his suitcase and picked up a duffel bag that I hadn't noticed before. It was clear he'd been planning this for a while, that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. "I left a note on the kitchen counter," he said, heading toward the bedroom door. "It explains everything better than I can right now." "Mark, wait," I called after him, but he was already walking down the hallway. I heard the front door close, and then I was alone in our apartment, staring at the empty space where his dresser used to be. I sat in bed for about an hour, too shocked to move. This couldn't be happening. Mark didn't have the backbone to leave me. He was sweet and accommodating and devoted. He wasn't the type of person who made dramatic exits or gave ultimatums of his own. But apparently, losing 60 pounds had changed more about Mark than just his physical appearance. Finally, I got up and walked to the kitchen, where I found a handwritten note on the counter. Mark's handwriting was neat and careful, the same way he approached everything else in his life. The note was longer than I'd expected, covering both sides of a piece of notebook paper. I sat down at our kitchen table and read it twice before the full meaning sank in. "Brittany," he'd written, "I know you're probably shocked that I'm leaving, but I need you to understand why. When you told me I needed to lose weight or you'd walk away, I thought you were trying to help me. I thought you cared about my health and wanted me to be the best version of myself. So I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life to become the person you said you wanted. But as I got healthier and stronger, I started to see our relationship more clearly. I realized that you didn't give me that ultimatum because you loved me. You gave it to me because you wanted power over me. You never supported my progress. Every time I reached a new goal or felt proud of my accomplishments, you found a way to make me feel bad about it. You criticized my dedication, my trainer, my new clothes, my confidence. You wanted me to change, but only in ways that kept you in control. I also realized that you never actually found me unattractive when I gained weight. You just used my insecurity about it as a way to manipulate me. You knew I'd do anything to avoid losing you, so you threatened to leave unless I became exactly what you wanted. But here's what you didn't expect. Getting healthy made me realize I deserve better than someone who only loves me conditionally. I deserve someone who supports my goals instead of sabotaging them. I deserve someone who wants me to be strong and confident, not weak and dependent. You never loved me, Brittany. You loved the version of me that needed your approval to feel worthy. And I can't be that person anymore. I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be with me. Mark. I read the note 3 times, feeling a different emotion each time. First shock, then anger, then something that might have been recognition. Mark was wrong about some things, but he was right about others. I had enjoyed the power dynamic in our relationship, the way he always deferred to my preferences and seemed grateful for my attention. I had felt threatened by his new confidence and independence. But that didn't mean I didn't love him. It just meant I loved him in a way that wasn't healthy for either of us. The first thing I did was try to contact him. I called his phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent him text messages apologizing and asking him to come home so we could talk. I even drove to his office, but security wouldn't let me upstairs to see him. All of my attempts at communication went unanswered. Mark had clearly decided to cut me out of his life completely, and he was sticking to that decision no matter how much I begged or pleaded. After a week of trying to reach him directly, I started asking our mutual friends for help. But what I discovered was that Mark had already told several people about our breakup, including the ultimatum I'd given him about his weight. The reactions were not what I'd expected. Instead of being sympathetic to my side of the story, most of our friends seemed to think Mark had made the right decision. They'd witnessed his transformation over the past few months, and they'd also witnessed my increasingly negative attitude about his progress. Ashley was the only one who was honest with me about how I'd come across to others. "Brit," she said when I called her crying about the breakup, "we could all see what was happening. Mark was becoming this confident, happy, healthy person, and you seemed miserable about it. Like you wanted him to stay insecure so you could control him." "That's not true," I protested. I was proud of his progress. I just didn't like how obsessed he became. "You complained about everything," Ashley said. "His workout schedule, his trainer, his new clothes, his confidence. You made it sound like him getting healthy was somehow bad for your relationship." I wanted to argue with her, but I couldn't. Because when I thought back over the past few months, I realized she was right. I had found something to criticize about every aspect of Mark's transformation, even though it was exactly what I'd said I wanted. 2 weeks after Mark moved out, I found out through a mutual friend that he was dating his trainer, Cara. The news hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Mark left me, but he'd immediately moved on with the woman I'd been suspicious of for months. All my insecurities about their relationship had been justified. I became obsessed with Cara's social media accounts, scrolling through her photos and trying to understand what she had that I didn't. She posted about healthy recipes and workout routines, but also about self-love and body positivity. She seemed to genuinely enjoy helping people feel good about themselves. In her photos with Mark, they both looked genuinely happy. Not the performative happiness of people trying to make their exes jealous, but the real contentment of two people who enjoyed each other's company. The comments on their photos were overwhelmingly positive. People called them relationship goals and said how supportive and wholesome they seemed together. Several people mentioned how happy Mark looked, how much he'd glowed up over the past year. Reading those comments, I realized that everyone could see what I'd missed. Mark was better off without me. But instead of accepting that realization and moving on with grace, I decided to fight back. I started posting my own thirst trap photos on social media, trying to remind Mark and everyone else that I was still attractive and desirable. I wore my tightest dresses and took selfies with perfect lighting and makeup. I posted cryptic quotes about loyalty and betrayal, hoping Mark would see them and feel guilty about how quickly he'd moved on. I shared articles about rebounds and how they never lasted, convinced that his relationship with Cara was just a phase. But Mark never liked or commented on any of my posts. In fact, looking at my social media insights, I could see that he wasn't even viewing my stories. He'd blocked or muted me completely, cutting off even the most casual social media contact. The realization that he was completely indifferent to my attempts to get his attention was devastating. 3 months after our breakup, I was forced to face the reality that Mark wasn't coming back. He'd moved on completely, both emotionally and practically. He was building a new life with someone who supported his goals instead of undermining them. Meanwhile, my own life was falling apart. I'd been so focused on trying to win Mark back that I'd neglected everything else. My work performance suffered because I was constantly distracted and emotional. I lost 2 important clients because I missed deadlines and made careless mistakes. I stopped taking care of myself the way I used to. I'd skip meals and then binge eat junk food late at night. I stopped going to the gym or doing any kind of exercise. I spent most evenings drinking wine and scrolling through Mark and Cara's social media accounts, torturing myself with images of their happiness. My friends started avoiding me because every conversation turned into me complaining about Mark or analyzing his relationship with Cara. I became the bitter ex-girlfriend who couldn't move on, and nobody wanted to be around that energy. Even my family started keeping their distance. When my mum suggested that maybe I should apologize to Mark and accept that the relationship was over, I screamed at her and hung up the phone. I couldn't handle anyone suggesting that this was my fault, that I was the problem. But deep down, I was starting to realize they were all right.